Let me know if you've heard this one before. Classic Halo just wouldn't survive in today's market. Games have evolved. Halo needs to evolve with them. It wouldn't appeal to a modern audience. If a developer or a person believes something needs to appeal to a modern market, the implication is that it needs to offer something familiar. It needs to offer something the market already understands, expects, maybe something we know they already like. But the problem is this means offering something they already have. Basically, you're following trends. And if Halo follows trends, it will, in my opinion, fail. I myself have said that a lot in the past, and admittedly, just as I feel some of these phrases we mentioned get thrown around a lot without substance to back it up, maybe my own statement, oh, well, no, actually, trends are bad, needs a bit more substance and explanation in its own right. And if you don't think this is relevant or something 343 is concerned with, then check out this clip from one of their employees at GDC.
First, let's discuss some high-level guidelines for choosing where to innovate. Number 1, stay on top of trends. Make sure you've got your finger on the pulse of your audience and pay attention to what's trending in your genre to make informed decisions about where to conform or stray from those trends. For example, increased mobility in first-person shooters.
Clearly, staying on top of trends is part of their process. And look, that's not always bad. Sometimes it ends up working out. I'm not saying it's impossible to succeed doing this, and sometimes if a trend works with your already successful formula, it might make sense to incorporate it. For instance, Battle Royale games are really popular right now. I view that as a game mode. Halo is really flexible and good at incorporating additional modes of play, and if done right, they could probably have something like that. I made a whole video about it. But when you have to change your formula and significantly alter the identity of your game for the sake of being trendy, that's when I think you set yourself up for failure. And I'll concede up front, this is a little bit of an emotional argument because I love Halo's original formula so much. But I do hope, even if you disagree with me, you'll at least consider this perspective. So here's a thought process to consider. It revolves around a statement I just made. Following trends means you are giving them something they already have. So attempting to replicate or cater to whatever that trend is in my opinion, not a great idea. Because no matter how much research you do, no matter how many times you look at the Twitch most watched charts or the Steam most played charts and use that to dictate what you think people will like, and you let it influence how you design, no matter how much you try to appeal to a modern audience and follow the trends of the games they love, my question is, why would they play your game instead? What's going to make them switch? And even if they give you a shot, even if they buy your game, what's going to make them stay? What makes you think players are going to leave the games they are already playing, games their friends are playing? What do you think will make them leave the communities they're already following and involved with? These people are watching YouTube videos, Twitch streams, they're following various personalities. It's what they talk about at school or amongst their coworkers. They follow the game's subreddit, discuss it on forums. What's going to cause your target audience to leave their current community and switch to you when your game is literally designed to give them something they already have? I don't care how much you think Breakout appeals to Counter-Strike players. They're not coming. I don't care how much you think Warzone caters to Battlefield or the large-scale warfare demographic. They're not coming either. Call of Duty's popular. Let's follow those trends for Halo 4. Yeah, and it ended in complete failure. Not only do I despise this idea that you need to appeal to a modern audience for these reasons, but you need to look no further than Halo itself for evidence that it just doesn't work most of the time. Because following a trend means imitating something that is established. And actually succeeding in that requires players leaving those establishments for your imitation. Now, obviously, it's not a one-to-one copy. Most games that design this way have their own little wrinkles and quirks that differentiate them, and I think you can absolutely say that despite a game like Halo 5 clearly following the enhanced mobility trend, a lot of people still liked it. It has its fans. I'm not trying to say it doesn't have qualities that some people find really engaging, but just take a look at this. Look at all of these recently released first-person shooters that have the same underlying mechanics. They all have sprint, aim down sights, sliding, clambering, just like Halo 5. And these are just the games I had on my hard drive at the time of making this. They've all just absorbed this same generic underlying formula. And while some of them add wrinkles, like Halo 5 with the thruster and stabilize, at a glance, they all seem very similar, don't they? I could absolutely see how the average consumer might look at one of these games and go, I kind of already have that. And don't get me wrong, some of these games are great. Some of these games are better off with these mechanics. But we're talking about Halo. And Halo already was distinct. If you think Halo 5 does enough to differentiate itself, I get it, not even going to argue with you, but classic Halo already did that. It already stood out, it was already loved and successful and unique, and it bothers me that a franchise that used to lead and pave the way as an innovator is now content with following. And if you think I'm trying to make this a classic versus modern style video, honestly, I'm not. If you like Halo 5, I think this video absolutely applies to you. It followed trends. I don't think it was successful as past Halos. I don't think it was as good, but for the people who do like it, well, enhanced mobility isn't the trend anymore. So what if for Halo Infinite, they follow something else and they change a bunch of stuff you like? Before you know it, you'll find yourself 12 years from now making YouTube essays about how we just need another game like Halo 5. Please, 343, just give it one more try. That would suck for you, right? That's how I feel. We need a little stability. And not only that, but if you're designing in this way, then you're most likely compromising your design and trying to fit it in where it has no business being. And I think the best chance you have of bringing in new players and expanding an audience would be to give them something they don't already have. Let's look at it from another perspective. I'm going to humor the idea that modern gameplay mechanics are indeed more popular, and they do in fact resonate with the majority of the gaming landscape. Let's go ahead and say most players would prefer their game to have sprint, thrust, clambering, all these things the Halo community constantly fight over. Hell, let's go a step further. Let's say only 10% of the entire gaming world would even be interested in a classic Halo game, and 90% would prefer the more modern elements like you would find in a plethora of other shooters. Even if this was the case, I believe a classic Halo would be more successful. Why? Because that 90% is already being catered to. They can already get that somewhere else, and if you attempt to appeal to the majority, you become one of dozens of games they can choose between, and as we explored in the previous example, it's no easy feat to make them choose you. Meanwhile, you have classic Halo, where even if you only appealed to 10% of the group, you would get all of them. They don't have an alternative for that type of experience. Literally everybody who might be interested in something like that would play your game because you're the only one. And what's crazy is Classic Halo isn't untested. Classic Halo never failed. It changed at its peak. And I personally think that style of game would be appreciated by far more than 10%. But the crazy thing is it would probably be a better option even if that was the case. If you pooled 100 people, I would rather 10 of them say they loved it than 90 of them say they liked it. Because those 10 people who loved it aren't going anywhere. And unfortunately, we have a gaming industry that would prefer the opposite. We have to dig below the surface level. We can't just throw everybody into buckets. Hey, did you like this or did you dislike it? What I want to know when it comes to Halo is, hey, do you think this is different? Is this special? Because if you can find enough people that feel that way, you'll be successful. And you're not going to do that if being the same as everything else is a design philosophy, thus following trends, setting your franchise up for failure. And quite frankly, that's why you see a lot of contempt over stuff like focus groups, because a lot of the time, focus groups only give you surface level feedback. And it's a bit of a stereotype and a common insult for people to call a game a product of a focus group. If something trendy gets added to a game, or if the core audience gets upset, it's, oh, they care more about what the focus groups say than their real fans. I'm sure you've heard something along those lines before. It's incredibly common. And let me be clear, I'm not saying 343 does that, but I would like to propose a theoretical argument that if they did, it would probably be a really ineffective way of building a game, because trendy and well-established ideas will typically resonate in a setting like that. And I really only say that to say this. Some of the best, most influential games of this generation would most likely perform horribly in a focus group. Imagine if you got 20 people who had never played Dark Souls before to give their feedback after a short focus group session. You'd probably have 1 or 2 people thinking it was neat, and 18 people confused, frustrated, most likely still stuck on the Asylum Demon. And I mean, could you imagine the feedback? Well, you know, I died a lot, and it was super frustrating. It just felt unfair. And yet, FromSoft trusted their vision. The Souls series was a massive hit, and it's so influential, it basically created its own genre, the Souls-like. The vague storytelling, the punishing combat, the lack of direction, the complex RPG systems. It's a very inaccessible game, and it's a perfect example of a game the market in 2011 might have told you, hey, you know, it's just not feasible. People need instant gratification. They need guidance. Don't overwhelm them. It just can't survive. Well, actually it thrived. And FromSoft's last game, Sekiro, just took home Game of the Year. What about Rainbow Six Siege? Maybe one of the most unforgiving, hardcore shooter experiences available. Maps are complex, with a near infinite way of attacking and defending objectives. There's over 50 operators, each with their own ability and quirks to learn both in how to use them and how you deal with other people who use them. And even if you try to say, oh, well, the operators are just them trying to hop on the hero shooter trend, it came out the same holiday season as Overwatch, barely a month apart, and it plays nothing like a hero shooter. There's camera systems and drones and tons of weapons with attachments, and on top of all that, it is unforgiving. Extreme lethality. One shot to the head and it's over, no respawns, you die, you sit till the next round. Imagine someone who's never played Siege trying it for the first time, and imagine them being asked to give feedback after only a handful of hours with the game. Just think about what you'd hear. Oh, I don't get it. I kind of just sat and watched other people play. You know, I died really quickly. I kind of wish I could get back to the action a little bit quicker. You don't think you'd hear that? Of course you would. That's what almost every single Siege player has to go through. And yet, it would sure be a shame if someone had changed the game because of feedback like that. Because if you can break through that initial barrier, what waits for you is one of the best experiences on the market. And you know what? Siege is thriving. Constantly at the top of the charts, just had a major tournament, and the reason it still grows and the reason people stuck with it is because it's special. It's unique and different, and you can't get it anywhere else. And that brings people in, and that causes people to want to help bring others in as well. And ask any recent Siege player, and I bet a ton of them will tell you that they started playing with their friends, and that's who helped them get over the hump. And I use these examples specifically because I think these two games represent philosophies that a decade ago were considered unviable. In a landscape dominated by twitchy, instant gratification shooters, Siege found a massive audience by building a game that is methodical and complex and unforgiving, and yet extremely team-oriented and vastly rewarding. And because it was unique, it couldn't be replicated. And those who felt captivated by it stayed and brought others with them. And what's crazy about these two examples is they found an audience due to how unique they were, despite their difficulty barriers, despite their unforgiving and arguably inaccessible nature. What's even more crazy, though, is Halo would not only be unique, but it is accessible. It is a game people can hop into and enjoy right away. It's simple and flexible, and even if you don't like the default multiplayer settings, there's countless other modes to try and potentially hook you and bring you in. Classic Halo is not only unique and not only historically successful, but it is infinitely accessible. And I encourage you to watch a couple videos on this channel that explore how we can take that and truly evolve it. And then afterwards, please come back here and let me know if you've maybe changed your mind regarding its viability. What I'm trying to say is that anything can survive in a modern market if it's actually good. And if you tie all these threads together, what I'm ultimately saying is that Halo can do that. Halo can be unique and different and attract an audience with a one-of-a-kind experience. And it's potentially damaging for a series to instead follow trends and rely on surface-level feedback to guide its direction. The irony is people look at fans such as myself as stuck in the past, as someone who doesn't want change, as someone who wants the same thing over and over again. But in reality, I'm advocating for the style because it's different from everything else out there. If you're following trends, yeah, you may not be the same as the previous Halo game, but now you're just the same as everything else. And I really think Halo would honestly stand out more if it was more like itself. I'm not saying people don't like games like Call of Duty or Battlefield or Overwatch, and hell, if you copy those ideas, they may even like your game too. But they might not love it. And while they might not leave something they love for something they like, they might possibly learn to love something new. Till next time.